Going all the way back to the original Legend of Zelda, uncovering and exploring caves has been a staple within the series. You can use bombs to reveal an entrance, and some Zelda games have a darkness and lighting system. To give my game more variety and more places to explore, I'm going to be implementing my own caves. ARM 1998 already created some interior cave tiles, which will work perfectly for this. I went ahead and designed a simple test cave level just to get things started. But before I do anything else in here, I want to create a way for us to enter and exit the cave. I've been keeping it a secret up until now, but there hasn't been a way to transition between different maps and levels. If I wanted to test things out in a certain map, I basically had to change which one got loaded when the game starts. But I figured now would be a great time to make a proper level transition system, since it'll go hand in hand with the caves I'll be making. So to change maps, there's a few things that need to happen. First, everything in the current map needs to be deleted, except for the player. Then we need to put the player at the correct position for the new map that we'll be using. And finally, at that point, we can load in all of the tiles and objects that come from the new map. For the first step, I have a full file dedicated to destroying basically everything. Every wall, item, effect, enemy, and so on. I can call this Destroy All function right when we start changing maps, and that takes care of the first step. Right after this, we can set the player's position to be where they're supposed to be in the new map, and this needs to be passed in as a parameter. Any given map can have multiple entry points, so the new player position when a map loads depends on where the player is coming from. So we can just set this up where a new position can easily be passed in and configured later on. And the last step was already in place. We load the new map and all of its objects the same way as before. We now have the foundation in place to change maps, and all that's left to do is create a trigger to make this happen. I made a new transition object type that's just an invisible rectangle, and when the player collides with it, the map change occurs. This transition object has an ID that determines which map we're going to, and it also has the new position values for the player, so they'll end up where they're supposed to in the new level. And with all this in place, I can go into and out of the cave. It's a bit jarring though how abrupt the change is, so I decided to put in an actual transition effect. I went with a simple black circle that expands to fill the screen, and then retracts back down to reveal the new map. This works by delaying the transition from happening until the circle fully expands. And by the way, the expanding circle effect is just tweening a variable acting as the circle's radius. The final result is super smooth and way less jarring. Now, back inside the cave, I want to make this area more atmospheric by making it really dark and giving the player a light source. I implement lighting systems like this by putting a big black rectangle in front of everything, which acts as the darkness, and then removing some of this rectangle so you can see through to where the player is. I also like using shaders to do this, and I have two options. First is a very simple hole punch option, where there's a solid circle around the player. And second is this faded option where the circle fades out into the darkness more gradually. I ended up sticking with the faded version since I think it just looks a bit nicer. The shader code works like this. We get the player's position and the radius of our light source circle. Shaders work by evaluating every pixel. In this case, it's every pixel of the black rectangle. And this distance value is how far any given one of these pixels is from the player. In this hole punch version, if the distance is less than the radius, that pixel of the rectangle becomes completely transparent. Otherwise, it stays opaque. In the faded light version, it calculates an alpha value, or transparency, based on how far from the player it is, meaning it will get more and more opaque the closer to the value of distance it is. I'll include a link in the description to this file since it's open source. What's nice about this light is that the radius can be adjusted. I made a lantern item that you'll be able to find that will increase the radius, making it a lot easier to see in dark areas like this. But now that the lighting system is ready to go, I figured now would be a great time to introduce a new enemy that will exist in the caves. It might be a cliche, but I decided on a bat. I drew up these bat sprites so it can be animated flying, and I put some in the cave. Their behavior at the moment is basically the same as the eyeball enemies, which I think is fine for now. But to set them apart, I thought it would be cool to make it so the bats can swoop down from the ceiling. I set up some invisible triggers, and once we get close enough, a bat will fly down and start chasing us. Before wrapping things up, there's one final thing I wanted to do, and that's covering the cave entrance with a cracked wall. Just like the Zelda games, I want to be able to use a bomb to destroy the wall, and fortunately, I have the code for this all ready to go. Way back in the original bomb video, I made these breakable rocks that the bombs destroy, and this wall will work the exact same way. I simply put the wall over top of the entrance and that's it. We can blow it up and go into the cave. One important thing to consider though is that once I go back outside, the cave entrance is still destroyed. The game doesn't remember this automatically. What I did was make it so any breakable object can have a specific name attached to it. In this case, I just called it Break Wall 1. Then, when one of these objects is destroyed, and it has a name, that same name gets added to this data.breakables table. Essentially, this just acts as a list of every breakable object name that the player has destroyed. And since it exists in the data table, this gets saved between play sessions. Then to make this all work, whenever the map gets loaded and it starts spawning in all the breakable objects, if any object it's trying to spawn has a name attached to it, and that name is in the breakables list, that means the player already broke it before, and it shouldn't get spawned in. It's a simple system, but it works extremely well. I implemented the same thing for the treasure chests, so the game knows if any given chest has already been opened before. And although a lot of work went into this, the cave system is ready to go. I'm looking forward to hiding a bunch of caves around the game for people to find and explore. Quick reminder, this game is completely open source and you can find a link to the GitHub repo in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like, and feel free to subscribe for more game development content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.